Can you hear me? Want to thank everybody in the platform team, especially Mark for having come from Virginia to sing. And happy birthday, Eric, our sound guy, who's producer of my show. In Ecclesiastes, we read these words: God makes all things beautiful in his time. God makes all things beautiful in his time. Some of you know, for me to come here to Raleigh 7 years ago was the result of a lot of turmoil and difficult process in my life. I grew up all my life in the island of Puerto Rico and came back from college in Atlanta and planned on being there for a couple of years to go on my spiritual path. The 2 years became 23. And as I was trying to find my place in the world, I had to face a lot of obstacles, health challenges, ultimately coming over here to Raleigh. We're talking like 2011. One of the things that I really felt in my heart for years, probably those 20-something years, that I was meant to help my people in the island spiritually. And I had been in business, but I did study on those years in the Unity School and became licensed Unity teacher and then minister, to find myself that almost like stuck in a business world that I didn't want to stay there much longer. And as I took up I built the courage to say, I'm out of here. I don't know exactly how I'm going to do this. Everything went downhill. And I sort of like faced one of my biggest spiritual teachers, who I now call my spiritual mother. And I said, why, if I feel so ready to do this, I have been preparing for years, I know there's a need, and I'm being sent out of the island to Raleigh. Of course, it was our decision, but it just felt that we were just kicked out, right? And her words were, well, people are not receptive for your message now, and you're not completely ready. So I went in a non-resistance way and headed over here 6 years ago at the church. And I remember my first Sunday back in the Longview Church, where I had gone through so much, and then many of you who were there at the time stood up and blessed me. And I remember thinking, they have no idea what I went through to be here, right? And as everything evolved, and I started seeing that I really I had a purpose on being here, and that somehow this whole move was divinely guided, I became like, okay, this is, I guess, I'm supposed to work here, serve people spiritually here, and that's the end of the story. But what I did not know was that the universe was kept conspiring to somehow bring me back and fulfill that dream. And the way it started playing out a year and a half ago, I mean, during the week in my office, and this guy I had never seen, well, I had seen, casually here, he walked in and he said, I really feel that you're ready to have a radio show in Spanish in the local station here. And I was like, well, okay, sure. I tend to be daring and outgoing, so I'm like, if this is supposed to happen, it's going to happen, and it happened. And shortly after that show went on in the air, somehow the opportunity of having the same show be aired in Puerto Rico took place. And not only that it took place, but it was like the #1 station in the island. And it's a longer story how that happened, but trust me there. All of a sudden, Monday night at 9 p.m., my half-an-hour show it's airing in the island. This is April of last year. And 3 weeks ago, I went home for the first time, like on a spiritual journey, on a spiritual tour. So I was supposed to speak in 2 Unity churches. I was offering 3 workshops, and the radio folks in the island told me, we really would like for you to do a live show, an hour long, and take calls. And I'm like, I remember telling Eric, because he's in a show every morning here in North Carolina, #1 show, by the way. And I say, Eric, what if somebody's rude to me or something? He says, no, just trust. So I'm really nervous, but it went well. And what happened was, to my surprise, as I spoke for half an hour, and then I'm taking calls, dial this number, whatever. I start seeing the switchboard like all lighting up, and I'm like, good evening. I'm using my artistic name, Revana. So this is Revana. And I was touched to see or hear people going, you kept us together during the hurricane. It was, I had no idea that for many weeks, it was like 2 stations working. So it's not that I had a daily show, but at least probably like a couple of weeks on a Monday night, I was it. And at that very moment, when I'm hearing all of that and seeing how people were so supportive of my workshops and my talks and everything, I went back to that moment in which my teacher has said, they're not ready, they're not receptive. And I started looking back, wow, how perfect, divine order that in April of 2017, my show goes on the air, and then in September, the hurricane hits. So it's like I'm being set up in a space to support people spiritually at the moment where they were gonna be as receptive as you can be, right? And there I am with my message available, which really reinforced the idea that God does things much better than us, and that God always exceeds our expectations. And now as I look back, I'm like, wow, I'm part of this amazing community. I feel that there's the consciousness level here to do greater things for the world. I have learned a lot on those 6 years personally and being part of the community. And now I can really bring this unity, but in a more, I don't know, sophisticated or elevated way. For a while, I was not too used to, like, after the workshop, people standing in line to have a picture taken with me. And I'm like, but it's this sense of gratitude of saying, we can get something else. We can look at life in a different way, which is what Unity has to offer. So I would like to share some of the things that I shared during my visit. Some of it during my talks and some of it during my workshop. Just some snippets, you say? Yeah, okay. So I'm like, I know that in the history of 500 years of Puerto Rico, I know, and I have some people from the island here, that this has probably been the toughest, most challenging moments in the history of the country, of this island, okay? The hurricane was just the last drop. It's beyond the country. And I could go into a whole explanation, which I'm not going to. But being there, there's this underlying sense of hopelessness. And I'm trying to see, how can I raise this consciousness here? And what came to me was to share and make people aware, especially because I'm seeing people in Unity there saying, if you're in Unity, you are a thinker, you're a seeker, you have questioned a lot of things, so you have probably the level of awareness to help create a shift in this island. Because anything that we see out there is the result of our thinking. And collective thinking will lead to a collective reality. So if we're not liking this, it means that there's shifts that needs to happen, and it has to start with us, those people there who are really trying to sort things out spiritually, right? And then I went into saying, don't underestimate how powerful your consciousness can be. And I did bring some examples that I would like to share. I mean, and we know that it is all like a domino effect. Whatever you and I are doing for ourselves, the thinking, the emotions, the belief system, somehow will have an impact in the greater collective. And then I used an example, and I know that I have some transcendental meditators here, but you know that it's not about shifting everybody, it's really about creating the critical mass, that 1% that transcendental meditators have proven that as they meditate and hold that higher consciousness, things shift, right? I brought the example of you probably heard of the 100 monkey effect. Back in the 50s, there was some experiment done in some islands of Japan where they would, particular monkey, they would eat sweet potatoes, and they didn't taste as nice when they were with sand. And one day, one of the monkeys realized that if he would take the piece of sweet potato into a stream, it would be rinsed off and it would taste better. So when that monkey made that discovery, started teaching it to other monkeys in the community, and they started by education shifting into doing that, eating that sweet potato without sand. But what happened was that when it reached the 100th monkey, that phenomenon started happening in other islands where there was no contact between the monkeys. So somehow, these monkeys were already going directly into the stream, knowing that it would definitely taste better without anybody teaching them, which really tells you how we are all one and how we are connected, right? And anything that, like Jesus would say in John 12:32, that happened to be the scripture of the day that I was born in the Daily Word, as I'm lifted up from the earth, all men are drawn into myself. So as you and I are lifted into a different awareness, we really can impact that enormously. But then probably the question is, how do I start? Where do I start? And this is part of what I offer in the workshop. And I'm going to show you something that I created. I created in Spanish and then English the prosperity framework. And as you see that image, I must say that I feel that this is like my contribution in the spiritual world. I think this is going to be my life work because it's what I resonate a lot with. And if I'm going to show you the next slide, and you're going to see my framework here. It all starts with practice. The spiritual practice leads to a purity of heart, will anchor you on a life of service, creating a sense of spiritual wellness. And that is what really prosperity is. It's a state of spiritual wellness. And when you and I are in that state, everything else in our lives, it's impacted accordingly. Our relationships, our health, our economics. And then that's how we actually impact the collective, you see? But the reason why I'm bringing this up is for want you to see that the spiritual practice has like a, larger space, because it's where everything starts and ends, right? So whatever we're seeing out there, at some level, we are part of it, right? We want to see shift? Let's practice. Let's work on that. It's like the pianist, the athletes, in order to master their skill, they practice, right? So if you and I were spiritual beings, we need to practice too. Somehow move from the world of appearances, move away from the world of physicality and materialism, I'm going to that non-physical spiritual realm and develop it, pay attention to it, take care of it. And something that I have been resonating a lot with lately is that we traditionally go to the practice when we have an agenda. We have certain needs, right? We have a health condition, we care for somebody else, and we go do our affirmations. But something that I've been resonating in my heart a lot is like, what if we just go just for the sake of going? Just to be in the presence, just to experience the bliss. Not that we cannot ask and intend and affirm, yes, but just going there for the sake of being in that space with the divine and experiencing our holiness, right? And the way I see, I was asked what's the best spiritual practice? And what came to my heart was the one that makes you keep going to it, right? Because it might be something, but I don't, this one works for me, and we all have our own. Where we could do it by duty, and sometimes we go, yeah, I'm supposed to meditate today. But what is it that you want to do out of passion and love? Right? So, what are the benefits of our spiritual practice? And this is not from any book. This is just Anna 101, okay, Revana. Because this is what I'm in my interior, like this is what works for me, or what I find of good use. First one being that if we have a connection with our inner self, it's that we spend time there. We hear our thoughts, we hear our emotions, we hear God. It's like your own special refuge that you have access to at any moment, but especially when the world is like messed up or feels that you're like, I'm in fear, or I'm restless. Well, there's a place you can go, almost like a spa, like an inner spa. I can go in there and start listening and start breathing and calming down. So that's one. The second one, to me, is that in a spiritual practice, we can facilitate a shift in perception. So we experience something, a diagnosis, a difficult relationship, unexpected event. It's so easy to go into fear and start giving power to all those external factors. But when we go within, we can work through affirmations, or by doing silence, we can start working on a shift to see, I might not understand this situation, I might be in fear, but I know there's no place where God is not. I know there's no place where God's good is not. So I'm going to open up to that good in this situation. And something that I love to do, this is how I trick my mind. It's worked for me great. I take, a situation that feels really like rough, and I say, wow, the same level of difficulty, it's the same level of blessing that is heading my way. And I go like, oh my God, because this is really difficult. Look at the amazing blessing that's coming my way, right? And what happens is that now there's a change in expectation. Instead of me going, well, why did this happen to me? I don't know how I'm going to work this out. This shouldn't have happened. I'm in trouble, whatever. Now I'm flowing with the situation, and I'm opening up through an expectation that something good or something better is on its way. Even if at the beginning it's not too noticeable, but it's like I'm starting to resonate with that. And remember, it's not how much we pray, how much we affirm, how much we meditate. Yes, it's all important, but it's what is it that we are expecting. It is the expectation that really, Because it's like, that's how you activate the law of mental action. You're saying, you're putting out that idea that there's good coming, and then the law returns to you because you are giving it power and expecting it. The fourth one is that it helps you, or helps us develop an awareness of truths of who we really are. If we really, like we were saying in the chant today, if we really know that we are holy, that we are divine, that we are children of an amazing God, that we are beings of power, and we know it with in every fiber of our being, how can that shift everything, right? And then last but not least, to me, the spiritual practice really helps me dissolve the fear, or at least manage it. And when the fear is under control, I can even detach from outcome. I don't feel that it has to be this way. I'm like trusting, and I wish I would have done it right away years ago. Initially, I'm like, why? I was resisting, I was in fear. But life had another plan, God had another plan, and I guess I started flowing, and the dream was fulfilled, but in another way and another time, in much better terms. So we, through a practice, we detach from outcome, walking into this place of knowing God is enough. God is enough. All we really want is God. So if you saw that diagram, it had spiritual practice on the bottom, and on the top, it had purity of heart. And I used this diagram for a workshop called Healing to Prosper. And my point to them was that that prosperity comes when you and I are in a level of spiritual wellness. And practice is the first step. And then it's almost like Mary Morrissey says, tuning into a radio frequency where prosperity it's flowing. So we do the practice, but we need to stay anchored in that frequency. And the way we do it, and we measure ourselves, is by seeing how pure we are. And I'm going to bring Jesus here. You want to get some Jesus here? Yeah. So from the Beatitudes, Jesus said, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." And God is what? God is all good, first principle unity. God is abundance. God is possibilities. So then it means that in order for you and I to claim that and to access that, we need to stay pure at the heart level, which takes us to the place, how do I stay in my heart? Take a deep breath and ask yourself, how can I stay pure? How can I stay anchored in the heart? And I'm going to give you 5 wonderful steps from Dr. Marsha in one of her works. So I'm like, I'm keeping this. So the first one is forgiving. The first step is by being in forgiveness. I know that the Course in Miracles makes a big emphasis on the forgiving part. Forgiving yourself, forgiving others. And you know why I love Reverend Rosemerger's definition of forgiveness is to return to love. So when we forgive, we are returning to the consciousness of love. If I cannot forgive you, I'm saying, I can't get back to love with you. And if you notice, it's really your own resistance, right? So the first one is always forgiving, staying in the forgiveness. The second one is a big one, surrendering, accepting, being willing to be in the unknown sometimes. Sometimes we are not going to understand. This does not make any sense. And we want to control, and it has to be this way. But what if we just say, I'm going to surrender. I'm going to allow. I'm going to let things be the way they're, towards the direction they're going, right? And the only way, think about it, the only way we can do that is by being the heart. Jesus in the cross surrendered and forgave. It is through the Christ consciousness that we can do that and being in the heart space. Third one being in gratitude. And I love to see gratitude like a GPS. I might get a little negative or influenced by other types of thinking, but if I get back to being grateful for everything, in the good, in what seems to be bad, being aware, if you have trouble gratitude, write 100 things you're grateful for and see how you feel after you're done. It will be really difficult to get back into depression or negativity because you realize that how much you actually have. Fourth one, which I think it's a big one, and I don't think we do much of that in Unity, it's really expressing devotion. Being like in that devotional frequency with God. It's like when in the Hindu tradition, the Bhakti Yoga, where it's really about praising. The Fillmores used to recommend that whenever you pray for somebody, you start just thinking and connecting with what God is. It's almost the same thing. Taking time to say, hey, God, and we know this inside, but it's within us and all around us. How great thy art, your love, your order, how perfect you've done this universe. And you're going to start feeling that the heart opens and opens because you are like in a love story with God and anchored there. And then last but not least, and I think I almost see that it's like the byproduct of the first four, when you are in forgiveness, in surrendering, in gratitude, in a devotional state, you want to reach out to others in newer ways, walking out of your comfort zone and saying, hey, Margaret, you look beautiful today, or doing things that you will normally would not do because you're so caught up out of the heart, right? So if we want to, and this is almost like the core message of my workshop and my talk, and I'm bringing it on here today, that if we really want to heal to prosper, if we really want to impact our society, our world, our country, it really, it's our work. And it starts in the simplicity probably of your own breath, on the space of saying, you know, I'm making God first, I'm making spirit first, I'm maybe realigning my life to make God like a, you know, more of a presence in my everyday. And like Brother Lawrence, the French mystic, it could be in the midst of your cooking, right? Doesn't have to be, you know, deep meditation, but it's bring that awareness of God in everything so that it supports the purity of the heart. And that purity will lead to a life of service and will touch everything else. But that's the thing. I'm going to bring an affirmation, David, which is, I think, hopefully my takeaway for today. And I want to have you say this with me, but with power, because the 9 a.m. at first we're like, spiritual practice. No. I want energy here, okay? John energy. Okay, so let's do this. Our spiritual practice supports our purity, the foundation of our spiritual wellness. From here, we impact all areas of our lives. And so it is. And so we let it be. Amen. Okay.